The sun had already dipped behind the horizon when Officer Mark Harris received the call. A frantic neighbor, breathless and terrified, reported screams coming from the sprawling suburban home at the edge of Indianapolis. By the time Harris and his partner arrived, the streets were quiet again, as if the night itself had swallowed the chaos. The large brick house, with its manicured lawns and picket fences, looked innocent, too innocent. But as they stepped onto the property, a chill ran down their spines. The front door was ajar. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Furniture was overturned, a vase lay shattered on the polished hardwood floor, and faint smears of blood streaked the carpet in erratic patterns. In the kitchen, they found the first body, a man in his early 40s, his eyes wide open in shock, hands frozen mid-gesture. Officer Harris's stomach turned. He had seen violence before, but there was something profoundly wrong here. This wasn't a simple domestic dispute, this was orchestrated chaos. The victim, later identified as Thomas Whitaker, was the patriarch of the family. Known in the community as reserved, polite, and charitable, no one had imagined he had enemies, least of all in his own home. His wife, Caroline, sat on the couch, her face pale, trembling, clutching a blanket around her shoulders. I don't know what happened," she whispered, voice cracking. But Harris noticed the way her eyes darted toward the staircase and the locked basement door. Something about that glance made his instincts scream. She was hiding something, or someone else was. Detectives soon arrived. Among them was Detective Laura Grant, a veteran investigator with a reputation for reading between the lines. She moved past the immediate chaos, surveying the home with sharp, methodical precision. Her eyes lingered on small details, a glass of water tipped over on the counter, fingerprints smudged across the handle of the basement door, and a torn photograph half buried under the sofa cushions. It was a family portrait. Thomas stood in the center, smiling. To his left, his wife Caroline, and to his right, 2 children, Emily and David. But the photograph was marked with strange scratches, almost as if someone had deliberately tried to obscure certain faces. Detective Grant crouched beside the photograph. "These scratches, they weren't random," she murmured. "Someone wanted to erase part of this family from memory." The team exchanged uneasy glances. It was the first real clue that this wasn't just a crime of passion. There was intent here, cold, calculated, and deeply personal. Outside, neighbors had begun to gather. Whispers spread quickly. Who could commit such a crime? Some recalled odd arguments in the yard weeks before, but nothing that suggested murder. Others remembered seeing a shadowy figure lurking near the house at night. But no one could identify the person clearly. Every lead seemed tenuous, every memory unreliable. The detectives realized they were navigating a maze of secrecy, deception, and fear, and the clock was already ticking. The first forensic team combed the house meticulously. Every surface, every object, every blood spatter was documented. In the basement, Detective Grant discovered signs of forced entry. The lock had been tampered with. But strangely, nothing appeared stolen. Valuable electronics, jewelry, and cash remained untouched. Whoever had committed this act wasn't motivated by money, they were motivated by something far darker, something intimately tied to the family itself. Then came the call that would send shockwaves through the investigation. Emily, the Whitakers' teenage daughter, had been missing. She had last been seen hours before the chaos erupted. Her bedroom was untouched, save for a diary lying open on her desk. Detective Grant picked it up, careful not to disturb the pages. Emily's handwriting was small, neat, almost meticulous. But the words revealed fear, secrets, and a terror no teenager should endure. She had written about arguments between her father and mother, mentions of a distant uncle who had disappeared years ago, and vague threats whispered in the dark corners of the house. Grant read aloud, voice low and steady. "They think no one knows, but I hear them. I see them. And if I tell, they'll come for me next." The team froze. The diary wasn't just a record of a scared girl, it was a warning. A hidden piece of the puzzle pointing to a secret someone in that family would kill to protect. Meanwhile, Caroline Whitaker remained calm outwardly, but her eyes betrayed a subtle panic. Detectives noticed her behavior. She hesitated when asked about Emily, glanced repeatedly toward the basement, and clutched a pendant around her neck as if it were an anchor. Something about her story didn't add up. She claimed she had been in the living room, preparing dinner, unaware of any altercation, but forensic evidence suggested she was closer to the chaos than she admitted. Hours later, as the night deepened, a uniformed officer called out from the backyard. There, behind a detached shed, partially hidden by overgrown hedges, they found a discarded cell phone. On the screen were photos that would change the investigation entirely, images of Emily with a masked figure, her expressions a mixture of fear and pleading. The timestamp indicated these photos were taken mere minutes before the initial 911 call. It was proof that Emily hadn't run away voluntarily, someone had taken her, and someone in the house knew more than they were saying. Detective Grant gathered her team in the kitchen, tension palpable. "We're not just looking at a murder," she said. "We're looking at a family torn apart from the inside, and a secret someone killed to protect. Every person in this house, every clue, could lead us to Emily, or to more death." The weight of those words settled heavily in the room. Then came the final, shocking discovery for the night. One of the crime scene techs found a key taped under the basement stairs. Trembling, Grant slid the key into the lock. The door resisted at first, then clicked open. Darkness yawned below, a space they hadn't yet dared to explore. And as the flashlight pierced the black, the team saw the first signs of another presence, another piece of the family's secret waiting to be uncovered. The silence was suffocating. Detective Grant whispered, almost to herself, "This isn't just a crime, it's a warning." And there, in the shadows of the basement, lay something that would turn the investigation upside down, a hidden motive, a betrayal no one saw coming, and a truth that would shock everyone involved. But when they stepped fully into the darkness, what they found changed everything. The basement smelled of damp concrete and something far more sinister, metallic and unmistakable. Detective Laura Grant's flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing a narrow staircase that creaked ominously beneath their weight. Each step echoed like a drumbeat, and the air was thick, as if the house itself were holding its breath. Officer Harris followed closely behind, glancing nervously at the walls, which were lined with dusty shelves and old trunks. And then they saw it, footprints. Small, muddy footprints that didn't match any of the adult family members. They led deeper into the basement, toward a heavy steel door partially hidden behind boxes of old files and family memorabilia. Emily's diary had mentioned secrets buried below, and now it felt like the house itself was guiding them toward them. Grant's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the handle. The metal was cold, almost freezing, and the lock appeared to have been tampered with recently. Someone had been here, and perhaps not long ago. When the door swung open, the beam of the flashlight caught the edge of a cot pushed into the corner. On it lay Emily's backpack, her shoes neatly placed beside it, but no sign of her. Grant's stomach tightened. This wasn't a simple case of a teenager running away. Someone had deliberately hidden her, and left a breadcrumb trail. On a nearby shelf, they found a series of photographs pinned to the wall, Emily with a man they didn't recognize, face obscured, sometimes blurred with hasty edits. But the writing on the photos made Grant pause. Threatening words, written in what appeared to be Caroline's handwriting: "If you scream, you vanish." Back upstairs, Caroline Whitaker was questioned again. Her voice was calm, but this time, Grant noticed the slight quiver beneath her controlled exterior. I don't know where Emily is," she repeated, but her eyes betrayed the truth. Something inside her house was hidden, something she had protected for years, and now the walls were closing in. Forensics combed the basement thoroughly. Fingerprints confirmed that the steel door had been opened recently, and traces of DNA were found on the cot and on a set of ropes that seemed hastily discarded nearby. The evidence suggested Emily had been held here, maybe for hours, maybe days. Whoever had orchestrated this knew the house intimately, its blind spots, its creaky floorboards, and its hidden corridors. Meanwhile, outside the Whitaker residence, reporters began circling. Neighbors whispered about past family disputes, heated arguments that Caroline and Thomas had hidden behind polite smiles. One neighbor, an elderly man who had known the family for decades, told detectives quietly, "The Whitakers always had tensions. But we never thought it would come to this. Some things were better left unsaid." That comment lingered in Grant's mind. Some secrets, she realized, weren't just personal, they were dangerous. By late evening, Detective Grant had begun piecing together the family dynamics. Thomas Whitaker, the victim, had been the disciplinarian, controlling but fair. Caroline, outwardly nurturing, had a history of cold decision-making, often covering for family missteps. Emily, the daughter, had witnessed arguments that went beyond ordinary teenage angst, noticing hidden threats, overhearing whispers about money, property, and a distant uncle who had disappeared years ago. And David, the son, had always been distant, withdrawn, seemingly indifferent, but that detachment now seemed calculated, possibly complicit. Then came the breakthrough. A forensic analyst found a series of text messages on Caroline's phone. They weren't recent, they were months old, but the content was alarming. Cryptic messages referencing a buried problem and instructions to keep it in the family hinted at a long-standing secret. Grant frowned. The danger wasn't a random act of violence. This was premeditated. Someone had been planning this for a long time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As the night deepened, a sudden noise startled the team, a faint creak from the upper floor. Harris drew his weapon, heart pounding. The sound came from Emily's bedroom, which had been empty just hours before. They rushed upstairs, finding the window open and the curtains fluttering in the wind. Outside, footprints led toward the woods behind the house. It was a trail, possibly Emily's, possibly planted. Either way, it was another clue, another twisted layer of this deadly puzzle. Detective Grant felt a growing unease. The house itself seemed alive with secrets, each room hiding a piece of the truth. And then she noticed it, a loose floorboard beneath the staircase. Kneeling, she pried it open and discovered a small, dust-covered box. Inside were letters, receipts, and photographs documenting years of clandestine meetings and exchanges, secrets Caroline had gone to great lengths to hide. The correspondence mentioned large sums of money, threats to family members, and references to the long-lost uncle, whose disappearance now seemed eerily connected. Grant held up one photograph. It showed the missing uncle standing beside Thomas Whitaker, smiling, but there was a shadowy figure behind them, barely visible, almost as if they had been erased from memory. And scribbled on the back, "Never trust your own blood." The words made her pause. This wasn't just a crime, it was a warning. A family secret had festered for years, and now it had erupted into violence. Then, a chilling call came from the lab. DNA evidence from the basement cot had matched someone unexpected, David Whitaker, the son. Grant's mind raced. Could the son have been involved? Or had he been manipulated? The complexity of the family dynamic now stretched beyond suspicion. It pointed to betrayal, deception, and motives that no one outside the household could understand. As dawn approached, Detective Grant stood in the basement, piecing together what little they had. Emily was still missing, Caroline's role unclear, and David's involvement suggested a deeper, darker plan. The family's facade of normalcy had crumbled entirely, revealing a web of secrets, lies, and deadly intentions. And then, just as she prepared to call the next lead-in, the phone on her desk rang. The voice on the other end was distorted, barely recognizable. "You think you know the story," it whispered, "but you've only scratched the surface. If you want her alive, follow the rules." Grant felt a cold shiver run down her spine. The family secret wasn't just deadly, it was still in motion, and the danger was far from over. Someone in that house, or connected to it, was watching, waiting, and willing to kill again to protect what they had hidden for so long. The basement, the diary, the letters, they were all pieces of a puzzle. But the final, horrifying truth was still out there. And the closer Grant got to it, the more she realized, this family's secret was far bigger, and far more deadly, than anyone could have imagined. Because someone inside the Whitaker household knew exactly how far they would go to keep the truth buried. And when Detective Grant opened the next envelope in the box, what she discovered would change everything again. twisting the case in a way no one could have anticipated. Detective Grant stood in the dimly lit basement, staring at the envelope she had just opened. Inside were photographs, notes, and a single, folded letter in shaky handwriting. The sender claimed to be someone inside the Whitaker family, someone who had watched, waited, and recorded every move for years. The letter was chilling. If Emily leaves this house alive, she takes the secret with her. If not, it dies with her. The pieces began to fall into place. The months of cryptic texts, the forced basement hiding, David's DNA, and Caroline's nervous glances, all pointed to a meticulously orchestrated plan. But it wasn't just Caroline or David acting alone. Someone else had been manipulating the family from the shadows. Someone who had a vendetta that had festered for decades. Upstairs, a call came from Officer Harris. Surveillance cameras on the property had captured movement near the woods. A car, unmarked, had arrived in the dead of night and parked close enough to the house to observe every exit. The driver was unknown, but the vehicle's registration returned an address connected to an estranged Whitaker cousin who had vanished years ago after a bitter feud over inheritance. Suddenly, the family dispute took on a new dimension. It wasn't just domestic tension anymore, it was a calculated attempt to control, intimidate, and potentially kill anyone who could reveal the truth. Grant raced to the woods with a tactical team. The underbrush was thick, and the cold night air bit through their jackets, but adrenaline pushed them forward. There, behind a cluster of trees, they found Emily, huddled, scared, but alive. She had been coaxed into hiding by her uncle, whose obsessive planning had spanned years. He had manipulated David into helping him, convincing him it was necessary to protect the family legacy. Caroline had been caught between fear and complicity, trying to placate both sides while protecting her daughter. Emily ran into Grant's arms, trembling. He said I couldn't tell anyone," she whispered. Her eyes were wide, haunted by what she had seen in the basement, ropes, photographs, and the knowledge that her own family had almost betrayed her. Grant promised safety, but the sense of danger lingered. It was not yet over. Back at the Whitaker residence, forensic evidence was re-examined. The letters, photographs, and basement findings were cross-referenced with financial records, phone logs, and old police reports. The estranged cousin had not only been living secretly nearby but had been funneling money into off-the-books accounts, funding the family manipulation, and orchestrating subtle threats for years. Every fight, every argument, every hidden glance in the Whitaker household had been a setup. The cousin had created a perfect storm, pushing Caroline and David into actions that now seemed incriminating, but they were pawns in a far larger, far deadlier scheme. The team moved quickly to arrest the cousin. Grant and her officers surrounded the remote cabin where he had been hiding. When confronted, he initially denied involvement, smiling as if the chaos he had sown were a game. But once confronted with irrefutable evidence, bank transfers, hidden cameras, and Emily's testimony, his composure broke. He admitted to orchestrating everything, motivated by a decades-old grudge over perceived betrayal and inheritance disputes. The meticulous planning, the manipulation of family dynamics, and the threats had all been designed to protect the secret he believed was his by right. In court, the case shocked the nation. The trial revealed the extraordinary lengths someone could go to protect a hidden vendetta, how ordinary family life could mask manipulation, coercion, and violence, and how even the closest bonds could be twisted into weapons. David received a plea deal for cooperation, Caroline testified in her defense, and the cousin faced life imprisonment for attempted murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy. Yet the story didn't end neatly. In the aftermath, the Whitaker family had to confront the lingering consequences: therapy, media attention, and the fractured trust that could never fully be repaired. Emily, though safe, would carry the memory of the night she was nearly lost, of the secret that nearly killed her, and of the realization that family could sometimes be the most dangerous people in the world. And just when the community thought the nightmare had concluded, a letter arrived at the detective's office. No return address. Inside, a photograph showed another property owned by the Whitakers' distant relatives. Scribbled on the back, "You caught one, but there are others who still know. Secrets never die." Grant stared at it silently. The case was officially closed, the culprit behind bars, and Emily safe, but the truth lingered like a shadow. Family secrets, she realized, were dangerous not just because of what people would do to protect them, but because they could breed violence long before anyone ever suspected. The Whitaker family would rebuild, but the scars remained, permanent reminders that betrayal could lurk behind the most familiar faces, that trust could be weaponized, and that the past could come back to haunt the present in ways no one could predict. And for viewers, the chilling reality hit hard. They thought the killer was caught, the family safe, but hidden truths often lie just beneath the surface, waiting, watching, and ready to erupt when least expected. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the dark secrets lurking in families everywhere.